you China as a potential major economic impact there. There's a sanctions bill waiting for the president in the Senate if he wants to push for that to go forward. I think the skepticism that I would point to on that is the 10 to 12 day timeline sounds a lot like the 2-week timeline that the president sometimes puts on things that he's not really ready to address yet and doesn't necessarily have a hard actual deadline bite to it.
Let's play, in fact, what he said specifically as it pertains to this deadline and Russia.
I'm going to make a new deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting. There's no reason in waiting. It's 50 days. I want to be generous, but we just don't see any progress being made. It would be sanctions and maybe tariffs, secondary tariffs.
Okay, we'll wait and see what ends up coming of this new remark and this potentially new deadline he set today. Garrett Haake, you did a great job capturing what was said in an hour-plus conversation and back and forth with the media. Thank you for your reporting. And I want to bring in American Action Forum President and former CBO Director Douglas Holtz-Eakin and CNBC senior analyst Ron Insana. Let's just start there with the Russia angle here. Ron, we've heard of these secondary tariffs. The threat of these tariffs on Russia floated a lot lately. Realistically, though, what kind of effect could that have on the Russian economy?
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, there's very much a mixed picture of what's going on in Russia right now. I mean, the defense side of the economy there is growing very briskly, but the internal economy that deals more with consumers and regular life is said to be in shambles. So it really depends on what those secondary sanctions look like. Will they be placed on China for supplying Russia with goods, or other countries that supply them with Russian, we should say, war material? Very difficult to assess at this juncture until we get more specificity from the president and the White House as to exactly what would be implemented and against whom. As it is, we're looking at higher tariffs around the world right now. So the net would not necessarily be a positive one for the global economy.
Doug, your take?
Yeah, I want to agree with Ron that it's not obvious how this would play out. I will note that there was a conversation in the China negotiations about not buying Russian oil, and China flatly said they would continue to purchase Russian oil. So you can say you're going to levy tariffs on Chinese products into the United States as a lever against Russia, but it's not obvious how effective that will be. U.S. consumers will still pay those tariffs, and China may or may not deal with the U.S. on those terms. So I would say wait and see on that idea.
The other big news that has come of this trip in just the past 24 hours, Ron, is this trade deal framework with the EU. 15% tariff on goods imported from the EU. Previously, it was 1.2%. 50% steel tariff unchanged. The EU to purchase $750 billion of U.S. energy over 3 years. The EU to invest some $600 billion into the U.S. No tariffs on aircraft, certain chemicals, semiconductor equipment. So that's the list of the deal as we understand it. Is this a good deal for the U.S., Ron? What changes would we see as consumers?
Well, I mean, if traditional economics held, we would be paying 15% more for European goods that are coming into the United States. Now, whether or not companies choose to absorb the tariffs and not pass along those price increases, the taxes that they pay to the government upon receipt of imports, is an open question. Some companies have been reluctant to do so. Some have raised their prices modestly. The full effect of this has yet to be seen. So it's hard to know. It's safe to say, however, that those tariffs are, on the order of 7 or 8 times what we currently have levied against the European Union. And when you look down the list, the $750 billion in purchases of U.S. energy goods, the EU purchases about $65 billion a year in energy products from the United States. So they would be almost buying 4 times more. We assume it's liquefied natural gas and nuclear materials from the U.S. Whether or not we have the capacity to provide that is an open question. So it's really hard, and particularly as we look at this and the Japanese deal together, there are no written legal frameworks that bind these agreements between either the United States and the EU, or the EU and the U.S. and Japan. So hard to really definitively say what the effects will be.
Well, and the president has made a series of misleading claims as he was announcing this trade deal. Let's take a look, and then we'll get a little bit of a fact check on the other side.
We don't sell cars into Europe. We don't sell essentially agriculture of any great degree. They want to have their farmers do it. and they want to have their car companies do it. We have a tariff of 15%. We have the opening up of all of the European countries, which I think I could say were essentially closed.
So Europe does buy American cars. It's one of their top 10 most imported goods from the U.S. The U.S. exports billions in agriculture to Europe. Last year, it was the most ever. And the president's suggestion that Europe is closed to U.S. products just this morning, in fact, his own trade rep said the EU is the largest destination for our exports. That's equated to buying $400 billion worth of U.S. goods just last year. Doug, the U.S.-Europe trade partnership is the largest in the world. What do you make of the president's mischaracterization?
Well, the president wants to declare victory with this trade deal, but it's far from obvious that this is on net a big deal to the U.S. economy. It's also far from obvious that it'll come to fruition. Remember, as president in his first term, he made a big deal about the commitment of China to buy U.S. agricultural products. It never happened. And as Ron has said, these aren't binding legal agreements. This is not something the Senate is going to ratify and that we will be able to hold other countries to. These are essentially handshake agreements between heads of state, and they may or may not have any real economic impact when all is said and done. And I'll also just note, like the Japan deal, this is not internally consistent. A $600 billion commitment to invest in the U.S. from Europe is a foreign direct investment that will bid up the dollar, hurt the ability of our companies to export, and on balance will actually make the trade problem worse, not better. So it's internally inconsistent.
All very interesting.
It's also,
Go
very
ahead.
quickly, it may also apply to deals that are already pending with respect to investment coming from Europe to the United States. So it may not be a new $600 billion. It may just be recounting money that was already on its way to the United States.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. Really appreciate it, Ron Insana and Douglas Holtz-Eakin. Thanks, guys. And now I want to bring in former German Defense Minister KT zu Guttenberg. Sir, thanks for being with us. What do you make of President Trump's shifting stance on Vladimir Putin, first and foremost, and what he's now saying about cutting Russia's deadline short to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine? It was 50 days. Now he's saying maybe 10 to 12 days. Do you think this will have any practical effect on negotiations?
I doubt it, Anna. We've seen it so often over the last few weeks and months, and the shifting attitude is just a habit. And it is something which makes Europe more dangerous place. It actually plays into the hands of someone who can wait it out, and that's the cynic in Moscow. So it doesn't help anyone. So I'm very doubtful whether that will have any serious impact on an agreement which we urgently need, but an agreement that also serves Ukraine and not just the interests in Moscow.
And on this EU trade deal, President Trump says this is a big win for the U.S. What about for Europe? I'll note several European officials are already criticizing it. How do you see it?
I'm very critical. You have discussed it before. It is based on utterly false assumptions from the president. 15%, of course, are harmful for the European economy, but they might also backfire in the US. Consumer prices might just be affected by it. And of course, there are some aspects which sound grand and great, but that actually aren't. So the big deal on energy, the big deal in quotation marks on energy, but also the one on investing in the US, it's taking place already. Yes, we have to buy energy anyway. We have to get rid of our reliance on Russian LNG. So therefore, it's actually good news for Europe. But bad news is we have a non-existing trade agreement on global stage any longer. It was just a further hit on stability and on trade relations that are based on reliability. And I'm sorry, I'm definitely not praising that agreement.
So you are saying it is a bigger hit to stability, while the European Commission president said this about it. That was, in fact, the silver lining, she said, of this agreement. Watch.
We have a trade deal between the two largest economies in the world. And it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. It will bring stability. It will bring predictability.
15% is certainly a challenge for some, but we should not forget it keeps us the access to the American market. And what we are also doing intensively is diversifying to other regions of the world.
Does Europe get anything out of this deal?
So look into the eyes and the face of the president of the European Commission. It was an expression of someone being between a rock and a hard place, or as we say in Europe, she had the choice between the plague and cholera. So either you would prolong an ongoing battle or fight on trade for the next months to come, or you swallow a bitter, bitter pill. For Europe, this is not good news, not under any circumstances. So therefore, I don't see any positive aspect of it. Of course, she has to sell it differently right now, but 15% on one hand, 0 on the other is not a good deal for Europe. This is just something which I would I connect with the term coercion. And if that's the style for the future to come, we may have stability for the moment, but who knows what the president might decide in a week or 2 weeks from now. And also the European member states have to approve to that deal. I think they will to some extent, but transatlantic relations are not in a good place right now, and I'm rather pessimistic when it comes to the next few months.
I do want to follow on the defense and energy spending here. The EU is going to buy $750 billion worth of U.S. energy, according to this agreement, this announcement. A lot of that is currently Russian gas and oil, which I think may surprise American viewers. Why haven't EU nations replaced their Russian energy supply at this point, now 3 years into the Ukraine invasion?
Many have, but the reliance was still at a very high level, and a lot of member states just missed the opportunity to diversify, which is of utmost importance. So Germany has started to do that, but countries like Austria or Slovakia or Hungary are still playing the game with Russia. So under that very note, I think the deal bears some good news. I emphasize some good news because I rather have a deal with the US and more reliability with someone who at least still resembles some of our shared values, as opposed to being fully reliant on Russia. But we need to do more homework here, and we have to diversify, but I rather diversify to the US than to some players who are also very questionable.
This deal apparently includes a commitment for the EU to buy U.S. military equipment. What do you expect that to look like?
Well, we are ramping up big time. You have followed the German infrastructure and military program, which is unseen and unheard so far. And we do need military equipment, and we need it quickly, because nobody can tell whether the Russian threat might be even widened towards the borders of NATO. And if that happens within the next 2 to 3 years, Europe will not be quick enough to actually build its own arms. So we need American weapons and arms. And therefore, that deal is a deal which we would have done anyway. So in that respect, he might still call it a big, big success, but that was something we needed and we do need. And therefore, if it leads to a stronger commitment of the US and NATO, it's okay. But the bizarre thing, Anna, is to tie NATO commitments to a trade deal is something which is just the opposite of a clear and coherent political strategy.
KT zu Guttenberg, thank you very much for offering your perspective and your insights. Up next, limited immunity, the protection given to Ghislaine Maxwell ahead of her meetings with former Trump lawyer and current deputy AG. We'll get reaction from a lawyer who has represented multiple Epstein survivors. Plus, Gaza emergency, a reality check on the horrors and the starving families are facing right now.
Hard to believe you can get this and all of this in just 2 minutes, or that it arrives at your door fresh and full of flavor. You know what they say, tasting is believing. Factor, all your meals made easy.
Shop Etsy for original items like these personalized portraits under $75 or handmade earrings under $60. Crafted by a real person to match your taste and budget. Special starts on Etsy.
And if I wear a sweater, I'm not going to be able to see. Oh, hey, there you are. Are you ready to go watch some more me? No, not this time. I'm wide awake. I'm not gonna fall.
President Trump may be overseas, but he can't shake the intensifying focus on the Epstein files here at home, addressing questions about it just moments ago in Scotland.
Does the president completely rule out a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell when you landed? Is that something you would ever consider, and why?
Pardon for who?
For Ghislaine Maxwell.
Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it. Nobody's asked me about it. It's in the news about that aspect of it, but right now it would be inappropriate to talk about it. So.
Doesn't the AG have to tell you if your name is...
Well, I haven't been overly interested in it. You know, it's a hoax that's been built up way beyond proportion. If they had anything, I assume they would have released it. The whole thing is a hoax. Those files were run by bad, sick people. If they had anything, why didn't they use it when I was killing Joe and then he gave out because he was 25 points down? I'm not a drawing person. I don't do drawings of women, that I can tell you. They say there's a drawing of a woman, and I don't do drawings of women. And also, you know, Epstein was always a very controversial guy. So if they would have had something, they would have used it.
So this drumbeat comes after Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche met with Epstein's associate Ghislaine Maxwell over 2 days, a meeting where Maxwell was granted limited immunity to answer questions without fear of retribution later on. That is, only if she tells the truth. Joining us now, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. So, Ryan, we just heard the president address a question about Maxwell and also slam all this as a hoax. What are the takeaways as you listen to what the president said this hour?
This is a very quick pivot that they're trying to make with his supporters in the MAGA base who have for years, you know, been wondering about this Epstein list, and now all of a sudden, never mind, don't look behind the curtain. It's a very quick switch, and it's not clear if it's totally going to work. I think you've seen some leaders, you know, maybe after some cajoling, sort of back off in the movement from this. But overall, I think there's a lot of people out there who are still very curious and wonder about this really quick switch from, you know, this being such a central component of this movement, including leaders within the FBI, who are the two heads of the FBI, the director and the deputy director, who had questions about this and appeared on podcasts about it in the past. And now there's just all this friction between the White House, the Justice Department, and the FBI over the handling and release of these files.
What came of her meeting with Todd Blanche? And well, she had 2 meetings, frankly, 2 days in a row, right? What did we learn about this limited immunity agreement she received?
You know, we didn't learn a lot of the content to come out of it, but, you know, the limited immunity deal is not surprising. It's sort of the king for the day or queen for the day offering. But what is unusual, of course, is that you have the president's former criminal defense lawyer, who is now the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, meeting directly with a convicted criminal defendant who is expected to spend the next 20 years behind bars. And what the incentives are for her are very clear here in terms of trying to get perhaps a pardon or perhaps some sort of leniency or even better conditions. Just everything lines up in terms of telling the administration or telling Todd Blanche exactly what he would want to hear rather than necessarily the full truth. And her truth is a real question here because of the pattern that she showed in the past of deceiving law enforcement. So she's not necessarily the most credible witness in the world, especially considering what she's been convicted of.
Yeah, very important to point all that out. Thank you so much, Ryan Riley. And joining us now is Eric Fudali. He's an attorney who has represented some of Jeffrey Epstein's accusers. Eric, first, your reaction to what we're hearing from the president this morning, talking about pardons of Maxwell, saying essentially not ruling it out. He didn't answer anything definitively, right? And calling it all a hoax.
You know, just the mention of a pardon is so offensive to the victims. You know, the victims have been through so much, and they have been wronged at every step of the way. For decades, the 90s, there was sort of the sham nonsense FBI investigation. Of course, then in 2008, Alex Acosta gives Jeffrey Epstein this sweetheart deal that allows him to continue to abuse women just after that. Then, of course, Epstein is finally arrested. You know, the victims think, okay, now there's going to be some justice. Of course, he's allowed to escape accountability by killing himself. And now, finally, there's been one person convicted in all of this. It's Ghislaine Maxwell, who's convicted of child sex trafficking, a heinous crime. So just even the notion, the discussion, the possibility of a pardon is so offensive to the victims. It's so disheartening, and it just continues this decades-long pattern of re-victimization of the victims.
And now Maxwell was given this limited immunity deal in part to take part in these new meetings and conversations, answer questions of Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General. Should that have happened?
I mean, if she wants to give information, I'm okay with that. You know, of course, on behalf of the victims, and I've represented a lot of victims of Jeffrey Epstein, you know, we do want exposure. They do want accountability for those who facilitated, for those who worked with Jeffrey Epstein, for those who enabled the most prolific predator of our time. There is a desire for exposure. There is a desire for closure. So if this leads to some exposure of those who enabled Jeffrey Epstein to be able to have this reign of terror on these women for so long, I'm in favor of that, but not in exchange for a pardon, not in exchange for any actual leniency towards Ghislaine Maxwell's sentence. I believe she, and I think I speak on behalf of most victims, believe that she should serve absolutely the fullest extent of her sentence.
We don't know much about what has come of these meetings that happened late last week, but we do know it was the president's former criminal attorney, now current deputy AG, talking with the co-conspirator of the president's former friend who was accused of such horrific actions. Do you trust anything that comes out of the DOJ or the White House at this point?
You know, especially when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein, it's hard to trust anything. You know, as I stated before, he has gotten away with everything. For decades and decades, people have known what Jeffrey Epstein is doing, and he's gotten away with it every single time.
So do you trust this White House to get to the bottom of it and to be transparent with the American people?
Unfortunately, I do not. I do not trust anything that's come out of anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein, especially as it relates to this administration.
Congressman Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, a bipartisan duo, have teamed up, and they're trying to force a vote in Congress that would require the DOJ to release all the Epstein files minus the stuff that would be, you know, private identification of victims specifically. Take a listen to how they're differing, however, on the Maxwell issue. Watch.
Do you think Ghislaine Maxwell should be pardoned or have a commutation of her sentence, her 20-year sentence?
No, I don't. She should testify, but she's been indicted twice on perjury. This is why we need the files. This is why we need independent evidence.
If she has information that could help us, then I think she should testify. Let's get that out there. And whatever they need to do to compel that testimony, as long as it's truthful, I would be in favor of.
So Massie, they're suggesting potentially a pardon could be justifiable if they get more information from her.
I disagree strongly. I believe it's absolutely not justifiable. Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of child sex trafficking. She had a full trial in front of a jury of her peers, and she was convicted. There was absolutely no justifiable reason for Ghislaine Maxwell to have her sentence reduced in any capacity. And the fact that we're even considering, or someone's considering on the basis of her perhaps giving some information, there's a lot of information already out there. They either should release the files or they should not. But relying on Ghislaine Maxwell's testimony in exchange for a pardon is just a ridiculous notion.
Eric Ridali, thank you so much for the conversation and for coming in. We appreciate it. So up next here, Ana Cabrera reports death and desperation, Gaza in crisis. What's being done now to get food to starving civilians?
Each week on my podcast, I'm joined by uniquely qualified guests who help me take a big picture look at the issues, like Representative Jasmine Crockett, late night host Seth Meyers, former Attorney General Eric Holder, and many more. Why is this happening? Listen now.
Transform your water and live hydrated.
Yeah.
Tear, pour, live more with Liquid IV.
In just 1 year, I had over $900 in banking fees, and I had enough. I realized just how much money I could save. That's when I found Chime, and I signed up immediately. There's no overdraft fees, no monthly fees, and over 60,000 fee-free ATMs. Just by banking with Chime, I'm saving hundreds of dollars a year, and I'm using that extra money for my daughter's future. For a normal guy like me, I've given myself a small raise. Join me at Chime.com.
Your work thrives on a schedule. You prioritize family time.
you make time to chase your dreams. There is one simple thing that improves all of your priorities: better sleep. Sattva wants to inspire the world to prioritize sleep with a selection of handcrafted luxury mattresses made and assembled in America. Because the quality of your sleep helps shape the quality of your life. Work smarter, love stronger, and dream bigger. Sattva, unlock the power of a great night's sleep.
We are just in the beginning of this second term.
We are watching top career prosecutors in the Department of Justice take a stand to uphold the rule of law.
We are the ones who will pay the Trump tariffs.
We're getting close